This week's episode of the And She Looked Up podcast is brought to you by Fine Lime Designs. If the name sounds familiar, that's because it's my design business and the work I do there helps make this podcast possible. If you love colorful and whimsical art prints, greeting cards, and journaling stickers, then head over to my Etsy shop for a delightful browse. Just search for Fine Lime, like the fruit, designs, all one word, on Etsy, or click the link in the show notes. And now, on with this week's episode. Welcome to the And She Looked Up podcast. Each week, we sit down with inspiring Canadian women who create for a living. We talk about their creative journeys and their best business tips, as well as the creative and business mindset issues all creative entrepreneurs struggle with. I'm your host, Melissa Hartfield, and after leaving a 20-year career in corporate retail, I've been happily self-employed for 12 years. I'm a graphic designer, an illustrator, and a multi-six-figure-a-year entrepreneur in the digital content space. This podcast is for the artists, the makers, and the creatives who want to find a way to make a living doing what they love. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the And She Looked Up podcast. As always, I am your host, Melissa, and Heather Travis is back with me this week. Hello, Heather.
Hello, Melissa.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Congratulations on your 100th episode.
Oh, thank you. Well, you were a big part of many of those episodes, so you get some
have to edit though.
That's true, but you definitely helped make them happen, so you get a little bit, you get a glass of champagne.
I'll take it. I will take a glass of champagne. Thank you.
Awesome. Yes, so for those of you who have not listened to all 100 episodes, Heather is a regular guest host who comes by once a month to join me. She is an artist and a muralist out of Owen Sound, Ontario, and she's also a PR professional, so we like to talk about the business side of creating for a living, and that is what we're going to be doing today. So we are tackling kind of a big topic. It's a topic that's not what it seems to be, I guess would be a way to describe it. But today we're going to be talking about whether or not you should aim for a 7-figure business. And first of all, if you're thinking, I'm an artist, I'm a maker, I don't think 7 figures is possible for what I do. First of all, I just want to tell you that's a bunch of crap.
Yep. Yes,
it is absolutely possible if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this week is because I have noticed this year that a lot of the podcasts I listen to and a lot of the small business or entrepreneurial groups for women that I'm part of, there really seems to have been a big push this year for hitting 7 figures. Like it feels like that is what everybody is supposed to be doing. I don't know if you've noticed this, Heather, or not, but that's all I seem to be hearing this year is 7 figures, 7 figures, 7 figures.
Yeah, and I love people spreading the message that making crazy money is possible, because it is possible.
Yes.
But I think one of the things that, and I think this is probably where you're coming from too, one of the things that really strikes me with this is that it's pointing that as the only solution to being an entrepreneur is making this massive income. And then if you don't, you have somehow failed. And that, I think, is what hurts us, particularly as artists and creatives the most, is this feeling that we've failed. And that's not cool, because you haven't failed. If you're selling your art and making an income, and we'll talk about all of those things during the episode, you haven't failed. You're succeeding. You're doing your thing, and yay you. So I think that's where it kind of rubs me the wrong way, is that it's pointing it as the only solution path you can take. And I don't think, and funny enough, this ties into the episode that you and Panita and I did around sustainability, and like there's an element of sustainability for me in terms of like having more money coming in means more money's going out. I'm probably spending more on resources. I probably have a bigger team. I probably need a bigger studio space. Like there's a lot that
Absolutely.
goes
Yes.
into all of that. Like you can't just keep doing what you're doing and suddenly have millions of dollars.
Yes. You've touched on all the points that we're going to get into, like right in that answer, so succinctly. So, yeah, basically, one of the things I don't like about it is that, first of all, I want to make it very clear. If a 7-figure-a-year business is a goal that you have and something that you want to strive for, by all means.
Yes,
but
do it.
Yeah,
and do it. And how can we help you? Like,
yes,
do it and get your friends to help you. Yes,
and we will talk about some of the things you have to be aware of if you want to aim for that milestone. But what bothers me about it is that for some reason, we seem to be equating a dollar amount with success. And I think that there are many metrics of success. A dollar amount is definitely one of them. But I think it's important to realize that dollar amount is going to be different for everyone. And it's really interesting. There was a meme going around on Instagram last night. I saw it on a few accounts. Oddly, while I was prepping for this episode. So basically, it was somebody saying that we don't need any more successful people. What we need is
I saw that too.
Yes, and what we need is not lawyers.
More empathy and more
empathy and kindness and healthcare workers and artists and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, since when is success separated from those things? Like that person was basically saying that success is excess. Like that's what they were equating success with. And I just thought, well, wow, first of all, if that's the definition of success, we are failing big time here. And it really annoyed me.
Yeah. Yes. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite songs I'm like, anybody who knows me knows I love my 90s hip hop, but there's a song from I want to say it's early 2000s, and one of the lyrics is money can't buy you happiness. And obviously, like, that's so true. And that, I think, is part of this conversation, that the happiness, or if you think that that's what's going to make you an artist or whatever, is achieving those 7 figures, that no, like.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned song lyrics, because that's exactly what I was thinking about in the shower this morning. I was like, there was a song by the band Switchfoot. I think the song was actually called American Dream. And there's a line in the song. It's basically talking about how the American Dream is a bunch of baloney.
Yep.
But there's a line in the song that is literally when success is equated with excess. Like that's when things start to go wrong.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, that's so relevant to that meme that was going around last night. So, yes. So basically what we wanted to talk about today is this whole idea of aiming for 7 figures, and what does it actually mean in terms of your business, but also in terms of what is important to all of us in terms of defining what success is for ourselves, and why it's so important that we don't get wrapped up in what success is for other people. And I do think this is something that I think part of it is your personality. I think different personalities have different ideas of what success is. But I also think part of it is, as you get older, you just start to think about things a little differently. I know I certainly have. There was definitely a point in my life where money equaled being successful. And that's not to say that money is not important, because it is. I don't want us to brush that under the
Yeah.
carpet.
Yeah. Like that's how we buy food.
That's
That's
right.
how we buy food.
And money buys us a lot of things, but I
Hmm.
think I remember listening to Pat Flynn, and he's one of the original podcasters and he does extremely well for himself. But I remember a couple of years ago he did an episode on this. He's like, I've really been thinking about recently, like, when is what I have enough? Like,
Hmm.
at what point do I not need to strive anymore to keep,
Hmm.
or am I striving for more just because that's the thing to do? Or do I have enough at this point?
Yeah.
Like, and it was a really interesting question that he was raising. And it was, I think more and more of us start to think about that as we get older. And I can't remember
Yeah.
if we talked about this offline or if it was on an episode or something, but we talked about this quite recently. Neither of us have children, and
Hmm.
we were talking about stuff and what happens to our stuff when we die, because a lot of
Die. Yep.
this seven figure conversation that's been going on, one of the things that gets talked about a lot is building generational wealth.
Hmm.
And if you don't have generations to pass it on to, do you need to build it? Right?
Yeah. Yes,
So,
exactly.
so and I was thinking about this a lot, like when I'm gone, nobody's inheriting anything. Like I'm not passing it on to
Hmm.
children. I'm not even passing it on to nieces and nephews because I don't have any. So,
Hmm.
do I really need to build this huge?
Yeah. Or do you just need to make sure that you have what you need,
To be
a little
independent? Yeah.
extra? Exactly. And that you have what you need to take care of yourself, your extended family, or any other responsibility that you have. And and then do you have a little saved up in case, of an emergency? And do you have enough to retire on to live? Other
Yeah.
than that, like, do you need a mattress shoved with cash or a bank account? Like, does it does it make your life any better? And I think about the stuff thing all the time.
Yeah.
We made a deliberate choice to move into a smaller home 3 years ago when we moved here. Funny enough, with a bigger studio space to accommodate my art, but a smaller house.
Hmm.
And that was to reduce overhead so that the pressures on our creative freedom were not as high.
Yeah.
And it has been a really wonderful, it's been an exercise that has been very fruitful and very beneficial. And I would say, we're all paying more for gas and we're all paying more for groceries. And if that is already pinching, then that is a sign that maybe things are like that. We need to have enough, and you need to have enough to cover these things, but you don't need to have extra millions. And if you do, I really I'm going to sort of jump on a soapbox for a second. If you have so much extra coin, please give it to people who need it. Like, donate to good causes, support artists, create STEAM systems in public schools. Like, don't just, like, what are you hoarding it for? That's where I'm like, what what status do you get out of seeing that big number in your bank account? That
Yeah.
that's where if you don't need it. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
No,
I went a
I
little top. I
agree.
went a little off topic there, but that's
Well, one of the thing, no, no, one of the things that is often mentioned as part of this seven figure goal is creating generational wealth, but also apparently, and I have not looked into this, so I'm just regurgitating what I have heard in other podcasts,
uh-huh.
um, is that female entrepreneurs are far more likely to give back to their
Yes.
communities and to pass on that wealth. And so that if that is something that is important to you, giving back to your community and
Hmm.
generational wealth and things like that, then yes, seven figures might be a
Hmm.
really meaningful goal to you because it's going to allow you to do work that's important to you. And so, if that's the case, then by all means, that's your measure
Yeah.
of success.
Yes.
And so, I think, Heather, we didn't talk about this before coming online, but I'm going to throw it out to you, and I'll take a
Yeah.
stab at it too. But like, for you, what does success mean right now? Full well knowing that what success means right now may not be what long term success is to you. Like what is it you feel like you need to be considered successful?
Yeah, so I mean, I there is a monetary factor,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely there is. But I mean, last year was a record year for me in that I did make six figures.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like hit crossing over that number. I've come close to it quite a few times, but I haven't. That was a big milestone for me. I don't have the same success metric for this year in terms of the dollar value. What I do look at though is reducing my costs. So success is making my business even more sustainable. So how can I make more money for less output? So is that increasing my pricing on paintings, which is something I did, increasing my hourly rate for my PR services and consulting services. So I did things. I mean, I haven't raised my rates in a few years, so it was one thing. But I think for me, my success is I have everything paid for. My house is paid for, my car is paid for, my food is paid for, without thinking. I think this is one of the things when I feel immensely privileged when I go to the grocery store and I buy whatever I want,
Mm-hmm.
whatever I want. And now, will I make a decision on X versus Y because a prime rib roast costs, 7 times more than pork chops? Sure, sure I will. But if I wanted that prime rib, food to me is the ultimate necessity and luxury.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, success is being able to have healthy food, good food, all the food that I want to feed my friends, family, entertain, but also the occasional meal out at a local restaurant. So for me, being able to do those comfortably without worrying, as well as saving for retirement, which is something I've started thinking more and more about because I don't want to work until I'm 80. uh, so that's a big one for me. And in fact, the retirement thing, like I just turned 44 and all of a sudden it dawned on me that 50 is like right around the corner and that like holy moly. And so Freedom 55 is not that far off. And they're like, what do I need to achieve that?
Mm-hmm.
Are some things that I've been thinking about, but it's definitely not, I don't start out thinking I need to make X. I think of the things I'm like, okay, well, I have this expense and that expense, and then I want to do this and I want to do that. And so I sort of make it's like the shoes for the outfit. It's like the last thing I put on is that number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which I don't know, which is so interesting because when people, this is just really interesting because I was just talking to a girlfriend who's applying for a job, and the first thing that she mentioned was, I'm only applying for jobs with a salary of $150,000 or more. And it literally was the starting point was the shoes, was the salary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so, as an entrepreneur, you kind of need to flip the model on its head and the number needs to be the last thing. It's like all of the things, because you might not need to make 150 to live your life the way you want to live. Maybe you only need to make 75,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And then you'll find all this time to volunteer and do things or craft or I don't know, learn how to roller skate or whatever. Like, you know, not a personal example.
You guys, you have to
Right?
go watch Heather's Instagram account. She's been roller skating all over her house the last few weeks. It's hysterical.
And it's so much fun. Anyway, but yeah, like to me, success, that was a really long-winded answer, Melissa, and I'm sorry about that. But to me, success is a very moving, like the dollar figure is a moving goal. What's
Mm-hmm.
consistent is how I want to live my life. I want to be able to eat well. I want to be able to feed, like entertaining friends and family is my love language. I want to be able to host people and not serve craft dinner. I love craft dinner, but I
I
want
love.
to
I
be
had
able to
craft dinner last night. It was great.
oh, yeah, exactly, right?
Just a little FYI on the craft dinner. The last couple times I've bought it, I've bought the sharp cheddar craft dinner, and it
Oh,
tastes way more like the original craft dinner before they tried to make it with all natural ingredients. So if you miss the original craft
interesting.
dinner, give the sharp cheddar craft dinner a try. So, anyways, this is just my
Okay,
pro
hot
tip.
tip. And yeah, that is a hot tip. A funny other hot tip. Brian said that you save back a little, is my husband, save back a little of the orange powder. I hesitate to call it cheese. You say hold back a little of the orange powder and then you sprinkle it on top of the cooked as like a breadcrumby topping.
Oh, so it's like a little
What?
extra flavor burst.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. I'll have to try that.
Uh-huh. I know. Anyway, we digress. What is success for you, Melissa?
Yeah, and I was thinking about that this morning. And so, yes, obviously there's a financial component to it. And I will say right now, very honestly, I'm not meeting the financial component that I want to in my head. So this is the first full year of being in my new business. And
Mm-hmm.
last year, I think I grossed about $26,000, so not very much money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I
Which is
definitely. Sorry, go ahead.
which is why savings is important, right?
Yes.
In
So,
terms of
so for me, the things that are important when it comes to money, first of all, I want to, like you said, be able to earn enough that I don't have to think about, I don't have to worry about where money is going to come from to pay for something.
mm-hmm.
So also in that list, I don't like debt. I currently, I have a car loan and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't own any property. So that's a, for me, that is success. I would like to own a property. Now, when I
Mm-hmm.
say that, I don't want something huge. I don't want to live in the city. I just want a nice single story bungalow
Mm-hmm.
somewhere quiet with a little
Mm-hmm.
plot of land where I can grow my vegetables and my flowers and sit outside on my deck and enjoy a cup of tea with some trees and birds around me. That's what I want. I don't want this
Mm-hmm.
cavernous
No. Echo,
house.
echo, echo.
Exactly. I don't want that. I
Yeah.
don't need that. I just want somewhere with good light and some trees and
Mm-hmm.
not too in the city. To me, having a 5-figure emergency fund is a very, being self employed, that's very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
I am also
Mm-hmm.
my dad's caregiver. So for me,
Mm-hmm.
it's very important. Having a little house somewhere in the middle of nowhere is not an option at this point in time, but
Yes,
it's a
yeah.
long term goal. But for me, being in a situation where he can stay in his own home as
Mm-hmm.
long as possible, that's very important to me. That's part of my
Yep.
success metrics, I guess, if you want to
Yep.
put it that
Yes.
way. And yeah, and giving back is important to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I I think for the amount of money I made last year, I gave back a lot, but probably more than I should have. But I want to be in a position where I can help the causes and organizations that mean a lot to me.
Yeah.
I want to be able to help them as generously as I'm able to, and
Yes.
and yes, as I mentioned, I'm not. I want to be able to retire, and I don't think I'll ever retire because I'm a working artist, and I will always be
Yes.
creating.
I'm with you.
Yes, but
Yeah.
I want to. There's the whole FIRE movement, financially independent, retire early. And
Yeah.
these are people who are basically financially independent and do not need to worry about earning a living for the rest of their lives, but they're still
Mm-hmm.
working. But they're
Yeah.
working at things that matter to them.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's the position I want to be in. That is
Mm-hmm.
success to me. I want to be able to I want to be able to have a flexible life, I think. you know?
Yeah. Yep.
And that doesn't necessarily, I don't need a lot of money. I'm not somebody who likes stuff. I I am the type of person who's very hard to buy gifts for because I don't like stuff. Like, just stop with the stuff. And because I'm not in a situation where I'm going to be bequeathing my worldly goods to anyone, the things that I do bring into my home are things that matter to me and that bring me joy. And so I'm very particular about what that is. And I think the other metric for success, and we were talking about this before we came on the air, is the more I think about it these days, the more I want to have a business that works to repurpose and reduce and extend the life of materials that might otherwise wind up in a landfill.
Yes.
So those for me are measures of success.
Yes.
And so I think, as you can see from listening to us, that money's a tool. It's not the end all be all, but it's a tool to get us to the things that we want to have. And that's how I look at money. I look at money as a tool. It's like you said, having it sitting there in my bank account without a purpose is pointless to me.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Like, funny enough, I was just, as we were prepping for this episode, I was just looking in my business bank account, and I was looking, okay, how much money is there but not there because it's going to the friggin' government, who bend us sole proprietors over on a regular basis. So I was looking at the $35,642 that is allocated for the government. Thank you very much. And then figuring out what was left over, what is actually in my business bank account, what expenses do I have coming up. But that, to me, like, that's not about the money. That's about the possibility. What expenses do I have, but what is possible with all of those expenses? Like, what, to me, it's like, I hate the expression, but dwelling in the possibility of, it's like, oh, wow. And I know we were just talking about reducing stuff, but I'm like, all the paints I can buy and the paintings I can make. But it's like, to me, it's the creation process. So not about the things, but it's like, I can have all the colors and I can make the canvases, all the things. And then that fulfills my mission of creating happy art and making people's homes happier and all of that. Right. So it goes towards all of it. But the money is like such a small factor.
But you bring up a good point, and this is something I'm going to put out there. Some people might not like what I'm about to say, and that's fine. But you mentioned how much of that money is sitting there waiting to go to the government, and this is something I do really believe that as women, as small business owners, I do believe that we should all be aiming for the 6-figure a year number. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be aggressively going after it. It's going to depend where you are in your stage of life and what is important to you. But I do truly believe that all of us should be running businesses that have the capability of earning 6 figures a year. And the reason why is because a business that is earning 6 figures a year in gross revenue is not paying you 6 figures a year. By the time you deduct your taxes and your expenses and all the costs of running that business, you're probably going to be taking home a salary of between $50,000 and $60,000 a year, which is not a horrible salary, but it's not. It's basically a salary that gets you by in today's world, depending on where you live, and your lifestyle. So, and assuming that out of that 50 to 60 grand, you're putting aside money for retirement and for your emergency fund and possibly for education for kids and things like that. It's a good, solid salary to know that you have coming in. But to actually bring that kind of money in, you have to be pulling in about $100,000 in gross revenue. So it's really important when we're talking about all these numbers that you understand that a 7-figure a year business is not putting 7 figures a year in your personal bank account. Not even close.
Correct.
So, but I do feel like women should be in a position where they can be financially independent if they need to be. And I
Yes.
know that there's a lot of people out there who've pulled back because they're raising kids or they're looking after elderly parents and things like that. Totally get that. I'm in that boat myself.
Yep.
But I know that my business has the capability of making 6 figures a year. Like, I know that it does.
Yes. Yes.
It would take me a little while to ramp it up to that, but I know that that I'm capable of doing that. And so I do truly believe that if you start a business, you have to be looking to that 6-figure a year mark as being somewhat of a benchmark.
For sure. And just while we're on things that I think all women should learn, have their own power tools and know how to do basic DIY things around the house. And this is not an anti-man. Please don't take it as that.
It's about being self-sufficient.
It is about being self-sufficient, and it's about empowerment. And I think confidence comes from doing. And so achieving things, making money that even if your household doesn't need it, quote, right? Because your partner makes, having that to add to the education fund or to donate or what, that's a huge accomplishment. And changing a light fixture is too. And I feel like there's so much more that women can do. And I think one of the things that has been holding a lot of female entrepreneurs back is that they see it as a side hustle. And in fact, it's like your go hard hustle, and like, do it and own it and rock it, because so many women and small business owners have the capability of doing that.
Yeah, if you relegate your business to side hustle, and when we say side hustle, we're not talking about doing your business part-time. We're talking about treating it like it's really just an expensive hobby. So, like, if your life is very full right now and you can't put full effort into your business, that's fine. But you still need to treat it like a business. And I see this in the arts and so many women, there's this whole thing going on right now with Etsy being on, Etsy sellers being on strike. And I could go off on a rant about that, but I'm not going to right now. And it's not in favor of the strikers. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
The point being that I see so many people selling their work for way less than it's costing them to make it.
Yes.
They look at it, they buy the raw materials at Michael's, which, by the way overpriced. You should not be buying the materials to make your stuff at retail. That's just not how you do it. Then they are pricing it at not even a margin that is going to cover their expenses, let alone their time. And that is an expensive hobby. It's not a business. It's an expensive hobby. And there's nothing wrong with having an expensive hobby, but you just have to recognize that's what it is.
Totally. Yes, exactly. Like, I mean, I strive to have an expensive hobby that I can support. But that, I'm totally with you. And that, funny enough, that was when I started selling my artwork publicly a bunch of years ago, and actually like looking at it. And the first time I charged HST, so I added it to my solo business HST number. I added that total to the line item as opposed to just like a couple $100 cash, whatever, between friends. Government, if you're listening, I did such things. And once I did that, I'm like, okay, wow, okay, this is a business now, which means I really do need to track expenses. And that's when I realized the price that I was charging for things was not sustainable. Like, didn't fit a proper business model in terms of sustaining the business in the long term. So
so that's when we say, you how do I say this? That's essentially what we're saying is like, you don't need to be you don't need to run your business full time, but you need to treat it like a business.
Yes.
And as opposed to being, when we say side hustle, we're talking more about like the expensive hobby type of thing, or something that you're testing out, or you're just sort of testing the waters with kind of thing. But yeah, these are the things that you need to think about. And yeah, I'm just really passionate about this because I have seen friends and family members who have gone through divorces or lost their partner to something tragic, or you know, and wind up in this situation where they are not able to survive or support themselves through their business, and it can especially if you've got children that you're looking after, it can be huge upheaval. So if you set yourself up to be independent whilst you know, like that's just a good skill to have. Right? It's just security.
Exactly.
It's an extra layer of security for you. Doesn't mean that you know, if your partner's the breadwinner, that's totally fine. It's
totally
not, like,
exactly.
This isn't about who makes more, what. It's just about knowing that if for any reason shit hits the fan, you are going to be okay.
Yes.
You can make things okay.
I see it as things like, you know, in our old house, one of the roles, responsibilities that my husband took on was using the snowblower when it was, but the moment that thing came into the house, teach me how to use it. I want to know how to use it in case I need to use it. Not because I'm gonna, but
no, well, what if he wasn't there and you were snowed in?
And that's exactly, and I was snowed in. So to me, it's like, I want to have the skill so that I can pull it out of my back pocket. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be awesome. It might not be $1 billion in terms of making the money, but it's the thing that I can pull out of my back pocket should shit hit the fan. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, what we've been talking about here is that, and as you've seen, success is going to differ. The measurement, the metrics of success are going to differ for everyone, depending on who you are, what your situation is, and that is totally okay. What makes you happy is what makes you happy, and you shouldn't be comparing it to anybody else's situation but your own, because we both know a lot of people who make a lot of money who are not happy, but by outside, you know, looking in from outside, they look like they've got it made. And
I would also say, don't compare yourself to people who you don't know their numbers, because if you look, particularly as artists, you'll see and you're like, wow, they just sold all their paintings. And yeah, sure, you can go on their website and see, oh, wow, if they sold all those paintings and each painting was 100 or 10 of them, then they made this much money, blah, blah, blah. You have no idea what their savings looks like, what their expenses look like, who knows? You have no idea. So unless you've had a frank conversation with that person about numbers, comparing yourself to them is only going to rob you of joy and motivation to just get it done yourself. I think that's a big thing for sure.
And that is an excellent segue into discussing what it takes to grow your business.
Ooh.
So, I have never owned a 7-figure-a-year business, but I have managed a multi-7-figure-a-year business back in my earlier retail days. And I have owned a multi-6-figure-a-year business, and now I currently have a $26,000 a year business. So I'm going backwards in my career.
Nah, it's a wave, Melissa. It's a wave, and you're waiting for the next
hilarious one. So I have actively been involved in running businesses at all those different levels. And Heather, you just shared that you are a 6-figure-a-year business. And I know that you and your husband also own a retail store. So, we're very aware of what happens as you start to scale to grow. And I think there's this common myth that the more money your business makes, it's not a myth, but maybe it's just a misunderstanding of how it works. That the more your business makes, the more money goes in your pocket, and that it's like
nope.
And I mean, in theory, yes, you hopefully if you're running a 7-figure a year business, hopefully you do have a healthy
Yeah.
take home salary.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not $30,000 a year. If it is, then you're doing other things wrong. So, but yeah, let's talk about that. Like what?
So I would say first off, and please, I am not an accountant. I have grade 10 math, and Mr. Stevens will assure you that was a courtesy pass to ensure that I did not come back to his classroom. But if you are making more than 6 figures gross, I would investigate incorporating your business because, as an example, the bike shop was not incorporated. And we had a gangbusters year a couple of years ago and just got bent over in terms of taxes.
Yeah.
And so that's great. The business made a lot of money. So did the government. We certainly did not. And so I would look at how you can ways to protect that income. I think that's the thing. And maybe sort of the crux of all that we're talking about is it's not so much the amount of zeros, but it's how you ensure that you're maximizing, that you get as much out of whatever number of zeros there are that you need. And that could be incorporating your business to ensure that if you make a boatload of money, the government isn't just taking half of it.
Yeah, that's and I am a very, very firm believer that you involve an accountant in your business as early as you possibly can, even if you're not making that much money.
Yes.
Because it's going to save you so much money in the long run.
Yes.
And
yes.
there are very significant tax savings when you incorporate after once you hit a certain revenue number. Okay, there's if you're below that revenue number, it doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
But yes,
no.
and it sort of varies, but the numbers that I hear are usually between 80 and 120,000 a year in gross revenue is where you want to start thinking about like.
But honestly, having a conversation, even if you spend $1,000, and that means that your business starts out at negative $1,000, that is $1,000 well spent talking to an accountant about how to set up. Because one of the biggest mistakes I made early on in my business, and I think I've mentioned it on previous episodes, I did not set up a separate business account. And when the government came calling for money at the end of the year, which surprise, surprise, they didn't forget to do,
Damn it.
I didn't have that money because I didn't realize how much money was going to be taken away from me, and B, it wasn't in a separate place. It was just in my bank account. So every time I tap that,
yeah, very
exactly. And so the government came calling, and then a couple of years in a row, I was under the assumption that our tax preparer was actually paying my HST, but they were not. It was up to me to pay my HST. So there were 3 years in a row that I did not pay HST. That obviously that money was long gone. And I owed it all. And the only reason that I was
penalties, plus penalties.
Oh, yeah.
The government doesn't let you just keep that money.
And the only reason that I was able to pay it was because my husband had savings from his business. I had no savings, and I, like, quite literally, and this is where the E on our episodes come from, I would have been fucked if he had not had that money to get me out of that hole that I dug myself.
Yeah. So this is one of the things when you start to grow your business. Okay, once you get to the point where you have to incorporate, and we're sort of pegging that 6-figure number a year as being around where it's going to happen. But yes, start talking to an accountant as soon as you can. The very first appointment I made after I quit my day job was with an accountant, and it didn't cost me $1,000. It didn't cost me anything.
Exactly.
It was a free consult. And I will just say this, I've been hearing some really crazy stories about not being able to reach accountants when you need them, or it's going to be 2 or 3 weeks before they get back to you. If that is the case, get a new accountant. Honestly, if your accountant is charging you a rate that is too good to be true, that's that's not good. Like there are times
Yeah.
where spending a little more money is worth it because it means you'll be able to get them on the phone when you need them, or they'll
Yes.
respond to an email when you need them, or and there are times where you cannot wait 2 or 3 weeks for a response from your accountant.
Nope.
So, you know, and if any of you out there are accountants listening and you are not able to return a client's call within 24 hours during a work week, you need to hire help.
You need to hire help. Exactly.
But
Yes.
once you incorporate, like, that brings in a whole new level of complexity to your business, in terms of
For
reporting
sure.
and paying your taxes. And that is where you get to the point where you probably won't be able to do your business taxes on your own. You probably will need an accountant to help you because it's a very different process. You are probably at the point where you, if you haven't already, are going to need to involve a lawyer. And lawyers and accountants and all those types of professional fees that you're going to have to start paying. You're probably, once you become incorporated, you are probably going to need insurance of some kind.
Yep.
If you don't already have it. That's one of the reasons a lot of people incorporate, so that they can get insurance, because all of a sudden they need liability insurance, or a vendor refuses to work with them because they're not insured. Like, Heather, you do murals, right? Like,
I have two different. I work from home, and I have two different insurance policies for my business. I have one that ensures that the work I do on people's social media, that there's a whole bunch of language around it, but I pay basically $1,500 a year for that policy. And then I also pay around $1,200 a year for a policy around like damage liability. If I'm painting a mural in somebody's house, if I'm on site and fall off a ladder, things like that. And as part of one of my insurance policies, it's for me exhibiting artwork in a gallery. So it covers my insurance. So that's $2,500, boom, right off the top of every year. And the irony of that is I could potentially not have any gallery shows and not do any murals, but I have to pay that. Otherwise, I'm removing that possibility from myself entirely.
yes, in my previous business, we had insurance because we hosted a lot of large scale events. We had insurance for that, which was required by the venues, and even our sponsors would require, like, they would need to see our proof of insurance before they would even come on and sponsor the event. So we paid a lot of money for that. And if you don't have an event that year, you still have to pay the insurance.
Still pay it. Exactly. And no matter, like, that's all the accountant, lawyer fees, all those things, they're basically fixed whether you make $1 bazillion or, like, you still have those costs.
Yeah, you're going to have to pay to have somebody do your year end. You may have to pay for an audit depending on what you're going through. And I'm not talking about like a tax audit from the government. I mean, I'm talking about like just having to show that your numbers have been audited by your accountant, your accounting firm. So those things all cost money, and they're part of running a business that earns good revenue. I think the other thing is there is a threshold, and it's a little bit different for everyone, but there is a threshold that you hit revenue wise when it's just you in your business. There is just a point where you can't take on any more clients, or you can't produce any more product, or there's only so many physical paintings Heather can paint in a year, right? And so at some point you are going to have to bring on help if you want to continue to grow. And it's going to be a little different for everyone, but you have to pay those people that you bring on, right? That's another cost to your business.
Totally.
And I don't know what that number would be for you revenue wise, Heather. I know in our previous business, I think it was probably around the $200,000 mark. And keep in mind, there was two of us in the business, so there was already two of us. But I would say it's probably around the 250,000. We weren't hiring a full-time employee. We hired two VAs who did maybe maybe 10 hours, 10 to 15 hours a month each. So they weren't doing a
Mm-hmm,
ton,
mm-hmm.
but we needed them to take specific tasks off our hands in order for us to
Yeah.
focus on those bigger things that would bring in more revenue.
Yeah. Financially, I'm in such an interesting spot because, and we've talked about it before, that I'm trying to sort of tip the scale from the PR side to the art side.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting about that is that I am having trouble finding those financial, like what balancing the time out and balancing project schedules and balancing the budgets for those, trying to figure out what is going to make me money
Mm-hmm.
to continue to move the business forward. And I'll say categorically, I'm way behind where I was last year financially. I just paid myself for the first time in this business year, in terms of the income that my business has pulled in. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting one in terms of looking at that. And as I'm talking, I'm staring at a commission that is almost done. But commissions, like they take up a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time. And I don't think I'm charging enough for them, frankly, considering how much the time they take versus just a painting that comes out of me organically.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's a very,
Yes, that's a very good point. When you create for a living, I always say like it's creating for a living is very different than just creating, because if you're
yes.
doing client work, whether it's like a full scale mural or a painting that's been commissioned from you, that is very different than just standing in front of a blank
Totally.
canvas and knowing that you can just kind of go wherever the wind takes you with it, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Very
Yes.
different. And as a graphic designer, I'm like, my whole business revolves around pleasing clients, which is it takes much longer. The creative
Oh God,
process
yeah.
takes much longer.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that's something. But even so, like you decided to create prints last year, and as
Yes.
part of that, you had to hire a photographer to
Yep. Who's also my printer. Yep.
to take the so that counts as a hire, right? And
I
actually,
know. I know. Yes, funny enough. And that does count as a hire. And I've hired upholsterers. I can
mhm.
never say that word properly. Upholsterers to help with my fabric launch. And so two people I've hired, funny enough.
Actually, and now
Uh,
that if I'm being really honest, we hired a bookkeeper, I think, before we hit 100,000, because we were both so
yeah.
hopelessly bad at that
Yeah.
hiring a bookkeeper, and it wasn't a big expense. I think we, depending on what time of year we're at, it's anywhere from $100 to $500 a month, depending very much
Yeah.
on what's
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
on. But yeah, sometimes spending the money to hire somebody saves you so much time that it's worth
Well,
it.
and it is worth it. And I'll tell you, I have two little stories to talk on that. One around the bookkeeping. One is that I do the books for the bike shop. Melissa and I had a very frank conversation last week where I was like, I'm in tears over the books. I am in tears. If it brings you to that level, maybe it is worth it to pay somebody.
Oh, I was constantly in tears, like
Yeah.
honestly.
Uh, but then in terms of the oh shirt, what was my other point? Oh, come on, Heather.
You had
It'll
another
come out.
story. You had another
I
story.
did have another story. Shoot. It was around creation. Oh, it'll come to me.
Okay.
Sorry, I
That's
blanked
all
on it.
right.
Oh, around hiring people. There we go. In order to, the reason I hired Jason, my photographer and printer, was to actually set up an alternate revenue stream. So I'd already
Hmm.
painted the paintings. How can I make more money off of those
Yes.
paintings? And so, like, fun fact, the originals of all of those, the original paintings that were turned into prints, I still have not sold the original
Oh,
paintings.
interesting.
Uh, yeah, heads up if anybody's interested, they're available. Um, but I have sold a boatload of prints. And
Hmm.
so I made money off of something that, funny enough, hasn't even left my studio. And so, yes, I had to pay Jason for the printing costs and his photography skills. But I made money off of something that if I had not hired him, uh, yes, I had his expense, but I had more profit than I had expense. And so those paintings, while still sitting here, actually generated income as opposed to not having the expense of hiring that person and not selling the paintings.
Yes, and this you brought up a very interesting point there. If you want to hit the multiple six figures a year, and definitely if you want to hit the seven figures a year number, you are going to need to have multiple revenue streams.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yes.
I mean, you can do it without, but it's very risky. it's
Mm-hmm.
it's very
Yes.
risky. So, you could go from having a seven figure a year business to having a zero figure a year business very rapidly.
Very quickly. Yeah.
So that is something to think about. As you start to grow these different revenue streams, you are going to have to invest before you see a return. And this is a podcast that I listen to is Rachel Rogers, the Hello Seven podcast, which is about hitting seven figures a year. And in her most recent episode, she made a comment that stuck with me. And she said one of the things that she has learned as she has hit this seven figures a year is that to get the really big opportunities that she still wants to investigate, she has to spend a lot of money before anything even happens. Like to even have access to the opportunities, she has to spend a lot of money. And this is something that we don't think about when we are trying to grow to these next significant revenue milestones, is that you're going to have to invest. And this is something I deal with every day in what I do. Most of the people who hire me to help them with their ebooks are doing so because this is a new form of revenue for them. It's a new revenue stream, and it's very stressful for them. And I'm not particularly expensive in the grand scheme of things, but for them, having to shell out anywhere from $500 to a couple $1,000 is extremely stressful for them because they can't get past the expense to see the revenue that's going to come in from them. And a lot of what I do is kind of coaching them along to understand that, like, this is an investment that you are going to make that's going to pay off in a new revenue stream that you can build on in the future. And so that is something you really have to think about when you want to grow your business, is like, are you going to be comfortable spending money to make money?
Yes.
Not everyone is. Not everyone is. And if
exactly.
If you're not one of those people, it's not going to be, you're going to really struggle.
Yes. And that's like, in terms of even budgeting, like that was the fabric launch, which we've talked about, has been a big lesson for me in terms of budgeting and how much money it cost in test yardage and all that. And like, I haven't looked at the numbers because I kind of don't want to. But I am pretty sure, that I have not quite, despite having a very successful fabric launch, I believe that I have maybe just covered all of, like, for sure, all the expenses to make the production line that I sold absolutely have been covered. But I'm pretty sure I've just barely, with the profits, covered my expenses of bringing the product to launch. So like, I'm currently, all of that effort and all of those sales, I'm currently at net zero.
Yeah. Yep. And
so
one of the points that was on our list of things to talk about today is, if you want to hit these bigger milestones, you have to make sure you're actually making a profit.
Yeah.
Making seven figures a year in your business means nothing if you're like, if you hit the $1 million in revenue, it doesn't mean anything if your expenses are $1,001. right? You didn't make
I
any
would
money.
like to meet you if your expenses are $1 million.
Hey,
Like
it could happen. It could easily happen. This is why, you hear all these 6-figure launches. What does that mean? It means they made
Yeah.
6 figures in revenue. That's all it means. It doesn't mean they made any money.
Right.
And revenue is not the same as money in your pocket. Revenue is not profit. Revenue is not salary. It's revenue. That's all it is. It's just a lot of money that came in. But you haven't talked about what went out in order for that money to come in. And
that's exactly it.
You have to wrap
and
your head around
having exactly the money to be able to sort of bet on yourself is really important, but also understanding that you sometimes can bet on yourself and maybe not.
It can go wrong.
It can go wrong. Exactly. And I'm definitely not saying the fabric launch has gone wrong. I know I'm going to sell more fabric, and I know there will be profits out of this. From my lips to God's ears, there will be profits off of this, but it's just going to take me a little bit longer to get there. But I am glad. And the reason I could afford to do it is because of the year I had last year.
Exactly.
Category.
And this is why it's important that your business makes a profit. You take that profit and you reinvest it in these new ideas, those things that you want to do to grow your revenue streams. You take the profit that you made previously and you invest it in a new revenue stream. New, like in your case, it was your fabric. And because that's part of the thing, when you create a new revenue stream, it doesn't make money right away. Very rarely, or it'll make a few dollars. But you're going to learn from the process so that you can go back, you can tweak the process, make it more efficient, make it more cost effective, improve your marketing. There's more people out there who've used your fabrics. The word of mouth is a little warmer.
Exactly.
You all those things. So, but before you can do any of that, you have to understand what profit is, and you have to know that your business is that, that the things you're making, that you're putting out there, that they are profitable. If you are a painter, do you know how much it costs you to create that canvas, that finished canvas, including your time? And make sure you're paying yourself more than minimum wage, please.
Yeah.
And it's really shocking for a lot of people when they do the work to see what it's going to take to actually make that item profitable, and they kind of go, I can't charge that much. That deep, sharp intake of breath. I can't. Yes, you can. Trust me, you can.
And sometimes it's not about yes, you can. It's yes, you have to. If you want to make money, you have to. And so, for instance, on my fabrics, the pricing, it is expensive fabric, but in order for me to cover my costs, plus cover the time designing, plus, that's the price. And yes, it made me uncomfortable putting it out there at that because it's more expensive than other fabrics out there. But
it is. I mean, if you think about
I need to sell it at.
Yes.
That's facts. It's just, that's it. There's no, to me, it's not up for a pricing model. Funny enough, you need to make a pricing model that's sustainable for your business and then just stick with it and sure, increase it over time, right?
As your costs increase.
You deserve to earn more money.
You can't subsidize your business.
No, you can't. And that's the thing. There can't be feeling put into it. You have to make it as Paula Abdul said, a cold-hearted snake. You have to be cold about it. This is the price, full stop. Because you've made that in order to make your business work. And if you're willy-nilly, then the business is willy-nilly, and then your profits are willy-nilly, and then
and part of that is understanding that the whole world is not your ideal customer.
Big time.
Right? There are people out there who are going to see that price that made you take a sharp intake of breath, and they're going to have a sharp intake of breath and say, no, thank you. They're not your customer. Okay. But there are people who will look at it and be like, yes, this is something I'm learning through, the writing that I do for people. I'm not cheap. I'm not the most expensive out there, but I'm not cheap. And I have had so many people come to me, and as soon as they see my rates, they're out the door. But the people who do come to me, they are people who are making well into the 6 figures. So they are busy. They have a lot going on. They know this needs to be done. They don't have time to do it. Take my money, do it for me, and leave me alone. Just do it right. And yes. And very often it's not even them that I am reporting to, in a sense. It's very often their assistant, because they don't have time. Right. And this is what happens when you run a business that is of a significant revenue size. You don't have time to be involved in the nitty gritty of it. You need to have people who can do that for you, because you need to focus on big picture stuff. And that might sound very corporate-y, but in the case of, like, let's take Heather as an example. First of all, we've already talked about the fact that Heather can only produce so many paintings a year, right? Just physically can only produce them. But if she is busy doing accounting and dealing with her contractors and worrying about this and that and all the nitty gritty, the amount of time she has to put into painting gets cut dramatically. Correct. So her output is shrunk even more because she's so busy managing the day-to-day of her business. Whereas if she hires somebody to take a few hours a week off her hands, she can put that into painting, or she can put it into focusing on big pictures, like the big pictures. You paint big pictures. That's hilarious. Yes. Well, I think it's hilarious.
I do.
But she can focus on things like, okay, how do I introduce a new revenue stream this year? Now she has time to think about it, because she's got the help she needs to give her that headspace, so she can create a line of prints or add a line of fabric, or put all her energy into creating a new line of fabric while her business keeps ticking around her, and still earning money. So, there's a lot of us creatives, like, let's just be honest, we tend to be a little bit control freaky. Like, I say this as somebody who
speak for yourself, Melissa.
Right? And when you're a CEO, which is what you have to be when you're hitting those multiple six figures, and definitely when you're hitting those seven figures, you have to be comfortable with being a CEO and having people who manage things for you and trusting them. If you're not good at that, you're going to struggle.
Yeah, but I will say, don't blindly trust people.
You
As the CEO, you still need to know what's what and what they're doing, not in a micromanagement type way, but you need to know what's going on so that you can manage the whole business.
And that's why you have to hire before you need people. You have to hire before you're desperate for help, because you need to have the opportunity to I was going to say test the person out. That sounds really cold. I don't mean it that way. But you know what I mean? You need to have time to bring that person into your business, show them how to do the tasks you want them to do in the way that you want them done. Training a person doesn't happen overnight. And if you don't train an employee or a contractor, you're going to create more problems for yourself in the long run. So you have to build in that time, that buffer time, that by the time you do need them, you have built up that level of trust. You know that they're capable of what they're doing, and you can let them manage themselves and report into you once a day, once a week, however frequent, depending on what it is they're doing for you. And sit down and have review time with them regularly, once a quarter, like how things check in, how are things going. That, like, those are the kinds of things that have to happen when you run a 7-figure-a-year business, and not everybody wants to do that.
No kidding. Yes, exactly. And you need to figure out, like, it's so interesting, because I joke, I clean the toilets at the bike shop, and that's a nitty gritty, but it's one of those things, like, I do all the cleaning because I'm there, and it makes it easy. And we could hire cleaning staff, and I could maybe find that extra couple hours in my week, but I'm also at the business that I own with my husband, and I get to do it, and I get to be there and see things and take ownership of things. And so to me, that use of my time is valuable. But for other people, and this is the thing, we go back full circle to the beginning of our episode, is what is success to you, and what is valuable to you is very different than what might be valuable to me.
Yeah.
And so to me, those 2 hours that I get to spend cleaning toilet and wiping windows down is actually valuable and meaningful for me to help drive both my life and that business forward. Other things, hiring an accountant, that time, wonderful to have to myself, delighted to pay somebody else to do the task.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
So, and it's pick your poison. Like, we all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses, and it depends on you, your business, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what your business needs, what your time needs, and what your life needs. I think that's the thing, particularly as entrepreneurs, having a business that makes your life impossible. Like, what's the point? You should, like, then just go work for the man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're working for yourself, make it work. Like,
exactly. There's nothing wrong with having a quote unquote real job if that's what best suits your personality. Like, not everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur.
Totally.
When I managed a 7-figure a year business, it was a multi-7-figure a year business. It was in retail. And, you know, to give you a sense of what it took to make that happen, I had anywhere from 15 to 20 employees at any given time, not counting the professional staff who worked, because we were a pharmacy. So we also had the pharmacists and the pharmacy techs who were a different chunk of payroll. Like, you know, we had a pharmacy manager who managed them, but I was still responsible for, like, that's how many people it took to make that store work. 9 till 9, 7 days a week. And that's expensive. And and I had to learn very quickly that I couldn't micromanage them. I didn't have time. There were other things that, as the person running the place, I had to do. Right. And so this is where you really learn very quickly. Like, in some ways, that job was one of the best I ever had, because I learned so many hard lessons very fast.
Yes.
And one of them was that delegation is the only way I'm going to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a really hard lesson for me. But wow, once you get comfortable with it, holy crap, it's like, what else can I delegate?
Yeah.
You do
no
this.
Kidding.
But yeah, it's it was different because it wasn't my business, but at the same time, I had to keep my job. So I had to learn these things really, really quickly. And it's something you have to be comfortable with as you grow. So I think the point of this episode isn't whether or not you should be making 7 figures a year. If you want to make 7 figures a year, if that is the goal you have set for yourself, go for it. You go. And I hope you make it. And I hope you are successful with it. And if you decide that, no, you just want to earn $50,000 a year to put in your bank account, and you're quite happy with a business that grosses $120,000 a year, fantastic. I hope it's successful. I hope that you're super happy. But the point that we're trying to make here is that, first of all, success is what you define it to be, not what somebody else defines it for you. It is what makes you happy. And please keep that in mind. Success is not about the physical trappings of success. Success is about how you feel at the end of the day. Can you look yourself in the mirror? Are you happy? Do you feel fulfilled? Can you put food on the table? Do you have a safe place to live? Like, those might be the things that define success for you. And the other thing we wanted to show to all of you is that hitting these huge milestone revenue numbers that people talk about obsessively to the point where it's starting to drive me crazy is I remember listening to Kathleen Shannon, I think, from the Being Boss podcast. She's no longer on the podcast, but she was talking about how, I think this was around the time she left, and it's on one of their episodes. You could probably find it. But she basically said one of the reasons she left is because she was running a 7-figure-a-year business, not being boss, but her personal design business. But she was in a situation where she was helping people who were trying to get to the $100,000 a year mark, and she said, the problems I have as a 7-figure-a-year business owner are not the problems that people trying to hit 6 figures a year are having. And it was
Correct.
very hard for her to go back and forth between the two, if I'm remembering what she said correctly. It was a while ago. And that's the thing to recognize, is that we all think when we're starting out that we have these insurmountable obstacles in front of us. And once we get over them, it'll be easy sailing. And it's not. You just hit another mountain range. That's all that happens. You land in this beautiful lush valley for 5 minutes and then there's another mountain range in front of you, and in some cases taller than the one that you just scaled.
Totally.
And that just keeps happening. If you live in British Columbia, think of what it's like when you travel from the Pacific Ocean to Alberta. It's just mountain range, mountain range, mountain range, mountain range, and they just keep getting bigger further you go. That's what running a business is like as you try to grow it. It's just peak valley, and you gotta, your troubles just change. They don't go away.
Oh, they don't go away. That's exactly it. I worked for a company years and years and years ago in the bicycle industry. And when I started at the company, I was one of 7 employees. And when I left the business 7 years later, I was one of 30 employees in Canada and one of about 75 globally. And we went from making like $1 million a year to making $1 million a week in that timeline.
That's crazy. That's it
was ridiculous. And it was a shit show. And the growth management, like, just because you hit a hurdle and you jump over it doesn't mean that when you come back around the track the next time around, doesn't mean that hurtle's not going to be there. Like, and it might have moved and it might look different and it might be a different color, but it's still there. And so don't, like, the success, I think it's all back to the definition of success, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what do you need to make yourself happy? What do you need for your life? And then
when's enough?
Figure out, like, exactly. And when's enough? Exactly. Because there will always be more problems and more hurdles and more challenges. Mm-hmm. And it's not to say if you maintain a constant level of, if you make exactly $100,000 every year forever and ever, amen, it's not to say that you will never encounter any troubles because you've done it once. There will always be, like,
there could be a global pandemic. There could be gas prices could be $2 a liter. You know, you just don't know, right?
Supply shortages, contractor shortage, like, you name it, there's going to be a hurdle. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think it's just a matter of, it's managing our expectations of ourselves. Mm-hmm. And then figuring out that definition of success. Like, yesterday I was able to leave my office and I went and drove and visited girlfriends. One girlfriend who lives relatively close by and another girlfriend who lives really, really far away came to that. So I had a visit and I left my office at 2:00 in the afternoon, and that was the end of that. Because that is what success means to me, is being able to see my friends on a Monday afternoon when I want to. And that is valuable to me.
Yes, I decided years ago that I wanted to be able to go see a movie on Friday afternoons if I wanted to. And that is still one of my success metrics. Like, to me, going
That's a decadent treat.
Oh my goodness, isn't it? I get to go by myself. I don't have to worry about whether the people I'm with are enjoying the movie. I get the whole thing of popcorn to myself. I don't have to have anybody else's hands in my popcorn bag. And I can just lose myself in the moment. Do I go every week? Absolutely not. But I could if I wanted to. But you could.
And that's exactly it. It's like those little indulgences. Yeah, I'm totally with you.
And when I do go, I enjoy it. To me, that's success. Other people might be like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I don't care. Right? It makes me happy.
And that's exactly it. And I think that's the thing, is like not judging other people and not judging yourself by other people's metrics of success. And
quite frankly,
I'm
So I'll just mention the Etsy thing again, the Etsy strike, because it was on CBC News yesterday on their website, and they had the comment section open for that. You know how sometimes the comment section's closed and sometimes it's open. And anyway, so I was reading through the comments and I was just like, wow, like just, I don't know why I read the comments on news websites because it's just so depressing. But the judgment that was in full force on everything and everyone. And it's like, you know what?
Yep.
Stop it. Mind your business. Stay in your lane and stop worrying about what the people around you are doing, because they're not worrying about you. They don't care. They're too busy worried about themselves. So just worry about yourself and what you're doing and make sure that you are in a situation that you are happy with and that feels successful to you.
Yes.
And don't compare yourself to others. Easier said than done. I know. We all have those moments where we are like on Instagram and see the thing and are like, why can't that be me?
Yep. I'll tell you, I have muted. There's a couple of artists who I absolutely love. I love their work. I love following them on Instagram. I have muted a couple of them recently because I immediately was comparing myself to them, and I thought to myself, Heather, stop it. And so this is my smacking myself on the hand. I've muted them for a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes you have to
so that I can just stop.
Just focus on what you need to do.
Correct. Getting this freaking commission done.
Yes. All right. I think we covered a lot here, and it was some big stuff. Like what we're talking about is big. It's big picture thinking. It's really diving into figuring out who you are and what you're about and what's important to you. And those are big things to think about. And frankly, you know, I understand why Heather enjoys cleaning the bike shop. I always have my best thinking moments when I'm cleaning the bathroom.
Totally.
Good scrub in the tub.
A good scrub.
So, or washing dishes. That's another great one for me.
Yeah.
So I hope it gives you a moment to step back and think about what it is you want for yourself, for your family, for your business, and figure out the path to getting to where it is you want to go, and recognizing that these big numbers you see being tossed around sound wonderful, but there's a lot of hard work and sacrifice that goes into getting those big numbers. And you have to decide if you're comfortable with making those kinds of sacrifices or putting in that kind of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. Heather, thank you so much for being here this week. Where can people find you online if they haven't already?
They can find me on Instagram at Heather Travis, or you can find my website, Heather Lynn Travis, and that's Heather, and Lynn is Lynne, Travis.com.
Absolutely. And if you follow her on Instagram, you might get to see her roller skating around her house. All right, everybody, that's it for this week. I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and I will be back next week with another new chat. Talk to you all then.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for the And She Looked Up Creative Hour. If you're looking for links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find detailed show notes on our website at andshелookedup.com. While you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter for more business tips, profiles of inspiring Canadian creative women, and so much more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the show via your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. We always love to hear from you, so we'd love it if you'd leave us a review through iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Drop us a note via our website at andshелookedup.com, or come say hi on Instagram at andshелookedup. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.